On a typical day in a suburban town, a group of thrill-seeking friends decided to dabble in the mysterious world of the Ouija board. Their leader, a 16-year-old named Davis, had acquired the board himself. Davis was an average teenager, with a curiosity that often led him to explore the unknown. He was fascinated by the supernatural, and the Ouija board was his gateway to the otherworldly. The board was an enigma, a flat surface adorned with alphabets, numbers, and a few simple words. It came with a planchette, a heart-shaped piece of wood, the vehicle through which spirits were believed to communicate. The friends gathered in Davis's room, an atmosphere of anticipation and apprehension enveloping them. The room was their sanctuary, a place where they could escape the mundanity of their suburban lives and delve into the uncharted territories of the paranormal. As they placed their fingers lightly on the planchette, their hearts pounded in their chests. They asked questions, their voices barely above a whisper, and waited for the board to respond. The planchette moved, guided by unseen hands. The room fell silent save for the soft creaking of the planchette sliding across the board. Each answer was more chilling than the last, the board revealing secrets it had no way of knowing. With every interaction, the board seemed to come alive, its presence growing more potent. It was as if they had unlocked a door to another dimension, a realm where the living could communicate with the dead. The thrill of the unknown was intoxicating, the danger of it merely an afterthought. However, as the night drew to a close, the friends couldn't shake off a sense of unease. The laughter and excitement from earlier had faded, replaced by a lingering sense of dread. Something felt off, but they couldn't put their finger on what it was. Deciding to call it a night, they stowed the board away in Davis's closet. A seemingly mundane decision that would later prove to be a grave mistake. After a series of spine-chilling encounters with the board, they stowed it away in Davis's closet, unknowingly setting off a chain of events that would unravel their lives. A week later, Davis, eager to continue their eerie experiments, discovered the Ouija board was missing. The room, once filled with laughter and whispers, was now silent as the grave. The air hung heavy with unease as Davis scoured his room for the elusive board. The friends, once eager to delve into the unknown, were now filled with a chilling dread, their hearts pounding in their chests. "Davis, it's not here," one of his friends called out from the closet, his voice echoing in the quiet room. They searched high and low, their excitement replaced by a gripping fear. The Ouija board, once an object of curiosity, had now become a source of terror. As they continued their search, Davis felt a cold shiver run down his spine. A sudden realization dawned on him. It wasn't just the board that was missing. The room itself seemed different, colder, darker. Suddenly, one of Davis's friends let out a startled gasp. The room fell silent as they all turned to look at him. His eyes were wide, his face pale. He was pointing at something under Davis's mattress. There it was, the missing Ouija board. It lay there, inconspicuous and silent, yet somehow menacing. They stared at it, their hearts pounding in their chests. There was something deeply unnerving about the way it had reappeared, almost as if it had a mind of its own. Despite the unsettling discovery, they decided to continue their exploration into the unknown. After all, they were just a bunch of 16-year-olds seeking a thrill. With a sense of trepidation, they picked up the board and placed it back on the table. The room seemed to darken ever so slightly, the air growing colder. They took turns asking questions, their voices barely above a whisper. As the session came to an end, Carson, one of Davis's friends, decided to take the board home. He was intrigued by the mysterious world of the Ouija board and wanted to explore it further. Carson, oblivious to the potential dangers, left the board in the trunk of his car. Little did he know that this decision would set in motion events that would forever change their lives. Life continued until one day Carson's brakes failed, leading to a catastrophic car accident. A day like any other turned into a nightmare no one could have anticipated. Carson, known for his jovial spirit and love for adventure, was behind the wheel. The car, a trusted companion, betrayed him in the most unfortunate way. The brakes, which should have been his lifeline, failed him without warning. His car veered off course, his life hanging in the balance as it sped towards the sidewall of the highway. In the chaos of the moment, a distorted face appeared before him, a terrifying apparition that would be the last thing he saw before the impact. In the aftermath, amongst the twisted metal and shattered glass, Carson's life was tragically cut short. The wreckage told a tale of terror and loss, but there was an eerie detail that stood out. The Ouija board, once innocently stowed away in the car's trunk, was found on Carson's lap, a chilling testament to the board's ominous presence. When the news reached his parents, their world crumbled. The loss of their son was unbearable, a void that could never be filled. As they sifted through his belongings returned from the hospital, they stumbled upon the Ouija board. This once seemingly harmless game had turned into a symbol of their son's untimely demise. Driven by their grief and the need to hold on to any remnant of their son, they brought the Ouija board back to Carson's room. The room, once filled with laughter and life, now felt cold and empty, the silence echoing the sorrow that filled their hearts. The Ouija board was placed back in Carson's room, a stark reminder of their son's fascination with the unknown. Unbeknownst to them, this act would set off a chain of events that no one could have predicted. The board, now back in its original place, seemed to carry a malevolent presence, a dark energy that lingered within its wooden surface. The Ouija board found its way back to his room, a malevolent presence lingering within its wooden surface. The room, once a sanctuary, was now tainted with an ominous aura, marking the beginning of a series of unsettling events that would forever change their lives. Davis and his friends, desperate to connect with their departed friend, decided to use the Ouija board. Amid the somber atmosphere, the group congregated in Davis's room, the same place where their journey into the unknown began. The air was heavy with a blend of grief and anticipation as they prepared to reach out to Carson through the board. They arranged themselves around the table, their fingers gently resting on the planchette. Davis, swallowing hard, took the lead. "Carson, if you're there, give us a sign." The room fell silent, save for the soft ticking of the clock. When the planchette started to move, their hearts pounded in their chests. It was a slow crawl at first, then a sudden jerk, causing a gasp to ripple through the room. The planchette spelled out Carson, sending shivers down their spines. The room seemed to grow colder, the shadows darker, as if the board was drawing energy from the space around it. It felt as though a veil had been lifted, and they were standing at the threshold of another realm. Davis, his voice shaky, asked, "Carson, is that you?" The planchette moved again, this time with more force, darting from letter to letter, spelling out yes. A wave of disbelief washed over them. They were communicating with their friend, or at least, they thought they were. But then, something changed. The planchette began to move erratically, darting across the board, its movements no longer gentle but frantic. The room filled with a palpable sense of dread. The board, once a means of communication, now seemed to possess a life of its own. It was as if they had opened a door that they couldn't close, a door that let in something more than just Carson's spirit. Disturbed, the friends threw the board against the wall, leaving a small dent. The room, once filled with anticipation, was now filled with fear. They realized they were dealing with something that was beyond their understanding, something that was far more powerful than they had initially thought. The Ouija board, once a game, had become a tool for the unknown. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Davis decided to return the board to its box and stow it back in his closet. The room was cloaked in an ominous silence, the closet door creaking as he nudged it shut. The board, once a source of innocent curiosity, now held a sinister aura, its wooden surface seeming to pulsate with malevolence. As darkness fell, the house was filled with the usual sounds of a quiet suburban night. Yet, a new and eerie soundtrack began to play out. A soft thud echoed from the closet, the sound muffled but distinct. Davis's heart pounded in his chest as he cautiously approached the closet, the cold grip of fear tightening around him. To his horror, he found the Ouija board on the floor, seemingly having jumped from its resting place. It lay there, oddly menacing in the dim light, the planchette ominously pointing towards the word goodbye. The malevolent force was making its presence known, its actions a clear violation of the unspoken boundaries Davis thought he had set. Terrified, Davis made the decision to rid himself of the board once and for all. He grabbed the board, its surface cold and unyielding, and hastily discarded it into the trash can outside. The garbage truck would collect it the next day, effectively severing any connection between him and the board. Or so he thought. Gathering his courage, Davis decided to share his experiences with his friends. He recounted the chilling events, his voice trembling as he remembered the board's mysterious fall and his desperate attempt to discard it. His friends listened in stunned silence, their faces pale and drawn. The room was filled with a tangible sense of dread, their shared experiences binding them together in their fear. The board had been a source of excitement, a thrilling peek into the unknown, but now it had morphed into a symbol of terror, its presence casting a long and chilling shadow over their lives. Hoping to put the nightmarish chapter behind them, Davis recounted the chilling events to his friends. Little did they know, the worst was yet to come. Davis's room became a stage for the paranormal as objects shifted and vanished without explanation. Let's enter the realm of the inexplicable, the eerie world that unfolded in Davis's room. As Davis tried to cling to the fabric of the ordinary, the extraordinary had other plans. His room, once a sanctuary of teenage solitude, now played host to an unseen force. Items would relocate themselves, not to be found for days, only to reappear in the most unlikely of places. Davis, in his youthful resilience, attempted to wave off these strange occurrences. He convinced himself that his mind was playing tricks on him, that it was his paranoia painting the mundane with a brush of the supernatural. The missing objects, the sudden chill, the sense of being watched, all were dismissed as figments of his overactive imagination. He tried to drown the dread with the sounds of his favorite music and the comfort of video games, seeking solace in the familiar rhythm of his daily life. But the malevolent force that had taken residence in his room was not one to be ignored. It clawed at the edges of his reality, persistent, unyielding. The whispers in the dark grew louder, the shadows at the corner of his eyes more pronounced. The air in his room grew heavy, the chill more biting. His attempts to dismiss these happenings only seemed to provoke the unseen entity. The paranormal activities escalated, growing in intensity and frequency. The once sporadic occurrences became a daily ordeal, a haunting reminder of the Ouija board and the chain of events it had set off. The room seemed to pulsate with an unseen energy, an eerie undercurrent that sent shivers down Davis's spine. The fear that Davis had been trying to suppress began to creep in, casting long, dark shadows on his bravery. His room, once a haven, was now a battlefield where he stood against the inexplicable. He could no longer ignore the signs, the whispers, the shadows. The ordinary was no longer a refuge, the extraordinary had claimed his reality. But the malevolence persisted, escalated. A few days later, Davis's mom came down the stairs one afternoon while Davis was having an after-school snack. As he munched on his sandwich, engrossed in the latest viral video on his phone, he barely noticed his mother's entrance. She held something in her hand, a familiar wooden object that made his heart skip a beat. "Davis," she began, her voice steady but laced with a hint of confusion. "I found this while I was collecting your laundry. It was under your bed." She held the object out for him to see, and there it was, the Ouija board, its ominous presence filling the room. But it was not just the sight of the board that chilled Davis to the bone. It was the message that was scrawled across its front in an eerily familiar handwriting. The two words that seemed to be etched into the wood, as if they were part of the board itself. "You're next." Davis felt a cold chill run down his spine. The sandwich he was eating suddenly felt like a lump of lead in his stomach. He looked up at his mother, who was still holding the Ouija board, her face a mixture of confusion and concern. "Where do you want me to put this?" she asked, oblivious to the terror that was slowly creeping up on Davis. As he took in the chilling scene, Davis could feel the room closing in on him. The walls seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, the air thick with a sense of impending doom. It was as if the board was alive, its ominous message a dire warning of what was to come. Davis, looking up from his phone, spots the Ouija board in his mom's hand with the words scrawled across the front, "You're next." The words echoed in his mind, a chilling reminder of the board's malevolent power. He knew then that the board was not just a toy, it was a portal to a world he did not understand, a world that held a sinister presence that was now part of his life.